They tried to erase me with a sentence. One crisp, well-practiced line, delivered in a room full of people who had watched me keep the lights on for nearly 8 years. They expected me to shatter, to argue, to beg for the chair I'd warmed through downturns and shortages and one international shipping crisis after another. I didn't give them the show. I gave them a nod, closed my laptop, and let silence do my talking. "My leadership style is too rigid for our culture," said the woman who had been president for 9 weeks and had yet to set foot on the factory floor. Her name was Clara Vance. She liked power suits and winter charcoal, verbs that sounded like missiles. Optimize, modernize, synergize, and slides full of gradients and arrows pointing to the future. The Monday leadership meeting was her stage. She chose it for the hit because humiliation is supposed to make people small. It works on some, not on me. "Understood," I said, because there's no oxygen for a fire if you don't open your mouth. A few people couldn't meet my eyes. A few did, and those looks, the quality manager's tight nod, the head of machining biting his lip, were notes of respect in a key you only hear after storms. I gathered my things while Clara moved on to a new topic, customer-centric work streams, or some other phrase that sounds like a treadmill, and when the meeting ended, I walked back to my office like I had every right to walk there. Because I did. I packed in 22 minutes. One box for the obvious, army mug with a chipped rim, picture of my daughter at graduation, the little bronze paperweight a supplier's kid made for me out of a leftover gear. One box for the invisible, binders of vendor notes, freight maps I'd sketched at midnight in hotel rooms, handwritten index cards with the names of people you actually call when a truck flips on the interstate at 2 a.m. and you need another in 4 hours. I wasn't taking proprietary data. I was taking my brain, which, last I checked, belonged to me. Clara materialized in my doorway as I tucked the last binder into the box. Her voice was soft now, made of thread instead of glass. "Daniel, this isn't personal. We need a more collaborative approach. You understand, right?" "Sure," I said. "I understand." She took that as agreement when it was simply comprehension. She didn't ask about transitions. She didn't ask who holds the relationship with Prairie Steelworks when an unexpected outage drops their weekly output by 30% and you need to reshuffle POs without wrecking your own schedule. She didn't ask why our fastener pricing sat 6% below the market with no quality slip. She didn't ask because she didn't know those were questions. "Numbers aren't everything," she added, and smiled the kind of smile that expects a smile back. "The last 7 years of numbers are in the system," I said. "You can read them." On my way out, I shook hands with the people who actually kept Titan Forge automation running. Louise from assembly, who could coax a temperamental pick-and-place into obedience with a wrench and patience. Margot from quality, who never signed off on a shipment she wouldn't bet her paycheck on. Brian from ops support, my right arm on the worst days. "You'll be fine," I told them, and I meant, you'll be fine as long as someone remembers you're the point, not the slide deck. I didn't go home. I drove to the river and sat on the bluff that overlooks the current. Barges muscled upstream. Diesel, steel, persistence. The wind smelled like cold water. For the first time in almost 8 years, I had nowhere to be on a Monday at 1 in the afternoon. "Congratulations on your freedom," I said out loud, and the river stole the words and made them less dramatic than they felt. Freedom wasn't what I felt. I felt inevitability. I'd seen this movie. Investors want polish, hire someone with a gleam, cut the old-school operator, install software that looks beautiful in demos and redundant in emergencies. They call relationships legacy and assume loyalty is a checkbox on a portal. They think supply chains are spreadsheets. They forget there are people on the other end of every PO, and those people decide who gets the last pallet when the world runs short. Titan Forge didn't start glossy. When I arrived, it was a loud, stubborn miracle wearing secondhand shoes. The plant sat in a converted warehouse near the old freight yard, where you could still hear late-night couplers bang together like thunder. The founder, Arthur Hale, was tall in the way oak trees are tall, quiet, stubborn, built to last. He designed a line of robotic sub-assemblies that made larger machines smarter. The technology wasn't the problem. The getting parts in, getting product out, was a pipe full of air. "Fix this supply chain," he told me in my interview, jabbing a finger at a whiteboard that looked like a patient's chart during a bad week. "You military guys understand systems. I get the machines. I need you to get the rest." 15 years as an Army logistics officer teaches you two truths. Yelling moves nothing, and systems run on trust more than charts. I didn't strong-arm suppliers. I built mutual dependence. If I bought your aluminum when market prices were high, you moved me to the front when the world ran short. If I paid you on 30 when your cash flow needed 20, you answered when I called at midnight. Most people think hard-nosed negotiator means squeeze until it breaks. It means know exactly how far you can bend without snapping. I lived in rental cars that first year. Prairie Steelworks in Cedar Ridge, Iowa, a family operation where the owner's mother still brought in cinnamon rolls on Thursdays. Redline Machining in Lima, Ohio, precision artists who could hold tolerances to the fifth decimal when you gave them clean drawings in a week without phone calls. Lakefront Fasteners in Holland, Michigan, run by a pair of brothers who fought like cats and delivered like clockwork. I didn't push them into corners. I learned their corners and stopped shoving. By year 3, our on-time delivery rate punched just under 99%. Clients stayed because boxes arrived when we said they would. We didn't undercut, we out-reliabled. Revenue climbed from just over $6 million to 14.8. Margins held because we weren't paying late fees and expedite premiums to cover avoidable mistakes. When the 2022 global freight snarl snapped lines like guitar strings, our vendor partners called me first. "We saved you 2 pallets," Prairie's foreman whispered once, like he was talking about medicine. Arthur noticed. "Whatever you're doing," he'd say in our one-on-ones, "keep doing it. Best decision I ever made was hiring you." Then Arthur sold. He had grandkids who called him Papa like a bell, a wife who missed him at dinner, and a 50-year-old motorcycle he promised to fix before it turned 60. The investment group that bought Titan Forge wanted speed and shine. They installed dashboards, consultants, and eventually Clara. The first time I met her, she held my handshake like a fish. "We're going to professionalize," she said, as if relationships aren't a profession. She canceled my quarterly supplier road trip, unnecessary in a digital age, and replaced it with a vendor portal that looked like a tax form. She told finance to push payment terms from net 30 to net 60 to improve cash, ignoring the ripple where small shops act like banks when you do that. She wanted procurement to send standardized contract templates to partners who had negotiated terms with me for very specific reasons. When I explained the why, she smiled in that careful way people smile when they want you to stop talking. So I backed up my notes. Not to retaliate, to remember. The way I write contracts is personal. No auto-renewals, annual reviews in a real room, signatures from people whose hands have touched metal. That makes you vulnerable to forgetfulness and protected from arrogance. I didn't design it as a trap. I designed it to keep me honest. Same mechanism, different outcomes depending on who holds the pen. 3 days after my firing, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized and a laugh I'd recognize from 2 rooms away. "Daniel Cross, as I live and breathe," said Mark Benton, chief engineer at Sentinel Dynamics, one of our biggest customers. Lunch. No agenda. Just 2 guys complaining about the world. We met at a steakhouse that smelled like 100 Saturday nights. Mark had carpenter's hands and an engineer's eyes. "Their loss," he said after 30 seconds. "But selfishly, this might be our win. A friend of mine runs a lab equipment company, Novatech Instruments. She needs a field general. I told her your name. Don't say no before you talk to her." "I'm not saying anything yet," I said, which isn't no. After lunch, I found a voicemail from Arthur. "What the hell were they thinking?" he barked. "Call me." And then the messages from Titan Forge's purchasing. "Midwest Precision says they only speak with Daniel. Can you share a contact? Valence Components wants to renegotiate. They're asking for you. Who at Prairie can authorize a temporary capacity swap?" I didn't reply. Not because I wanted them to fail, but because nobody had asked me for a transition plan when the decision was made. If you don't want my judgment, you don't get my memory. By Friday, I had 4 offers. Novatech's was the only one that came with humility. Julia Reeves, their CEO, didn't pretend. "We're good at science," she said. "We're bad at moving parts. If you can build us a backbone, we'll give you the authority to do it right. If you hit the targets we set together, there's equity on the other side." I took the weekend. I walked, cooked, cleaned the garage like I could scrub indecision off the floor. Monday morning, I called Julia. "I'm in," I said. "But I don't do this halfway." "Neither do I," she said. Novatech made laboratory instruments for biotech firms. Different in-market, same physics. Parts in, quality out, promises kept. My first day I did what I always do. Ditched the suit jacket, walked the floor, and asked the people doing the work to tell me the truth. The truth came like water from a pipe with a crack. Vendors missed dates, but nobody escalated. Inspectors found trends, but reports died in inboxes. Inventory counts were estimates, because cycle counts belong to no one. We can fix this, I told Julia at 5 that evening, sliding a yellow pad across her desk. 3 immediate moves. Lock weekly calls with critical vendors, stop hiding line stoppages behind buffers, and pay our 2 smallest suppliers on 20 days until they catch their breath. Long term, restructure contracts so we review annually with a human in the room, not an email in a folder. We'll layer software on top of trust, not instead of it. Do it, she said. I'll get you what you need. That week, Clara started calling. First a polite voicemail. Daniel, hope you're well. We're having some supplier hiccups. Would you be available for a brief consult? Then a more urgent one. We're experiencing unforeseen resistance. I think you can help. Name your rate. Then she showed up at Novatech's reception desk with perfect posture and a plastic smile, telling my receptionist it was urgent. I watched through the security feed, Clara pacing, checking her phone, glancing at the elevator like it might grow compassion, until she left 30 minutes later with her jaw tight. I didn't enjoy it. I observed it. There's a difference. Brian texted me 2 days later. Complete chaos, he wrote. Portal crashed when they tried to force everyone through the new system. Prairie raised prices 12% on the renewal. Lakefront pushed deliveries 6 weeks. The new guy from business school keeps saying we're too important to them to lose priority. I don't think he's met people before. Hang in, I wrote back. Keep your head down. A week after that, an email from Titan Forge Legal landed in my personal inbox, accusing me of violating a non-solicitation clause I hadn't violated. They attached a PDF with italics. I forwarded it to Novatech's counsel without comment. No merit, came the reply. We'll handle. It's easy to blame the person who left. It's harder to ask why the ground gave way when he took his weight off it. The turning point came in a coffee shop with a woman who looked like she'd slept in her office chair for a week. I'm out, said Lila Chun, Titan Forge's head of finance. We'd worked together for years. If I'm an operator, she's a metronome. They want 20% margin expansion in 4 quarters, she said, sliding a tablet across the table with a spreadsheet that would make a sober person dizzy. They think it comes out of suppliers like water from a rock. When I push back, I'm told to think bigger. When I ask about quality degradation, I'm told we'll manage optics. Are they closing St. Paul? I asked, thinking about the plant that had survived a flood and 3 management fads. They're discussing it, she said. 200 jobs. I sent in my resignation yesterday. I won't preside over that. Clara fired me publicly because a private conversation would have given me time to build a counterweight, I said. This is the same move. Make everyone watch while you cut the person who knows where the joints are. Lila pressed her lips together. They're trying to buy Arthur's remaining stake below value, she added. They want the vote clean. I left that coffee with 2 truths in my pocket. Titan Forge's owners were desperate. Desperation makes bad deals cheap. That night, I drove to Arthur's house. He was in his garage under a motorcycle he'd been promising to resurrect for 15 years. They want you to sell? I said. They want me to do a lot of things, he grunted, handing me a rag. They forget retired doesn't mean stupid. What if there's another option? I asked. What if Novatech buys Titan Forge's assets before the investors light them on fire? We need capacity. We need some of your product line. We can save jobs, and we can do it without caving to people who think spreadsheets are supply chains. Arthur slid out from under the bike and looked at me with those mechanic eyes that measure before they move. You serious? Very, I said. But timing matters. We don't catch a falling knife. We wait until they put it down because it cuts them. How long, he asked. At their burn rate? I said, 6 to 8 weeks until cash flow becomes geometry. A slow smile crept across his face. You calculating son of a gun. I'm not sabotaging anything, I said. I'm letting gravity work. Gravity's undefeated, he said. I'll make a call. While Titan Forge burned, we built. At Novatech, we instituted Monday noon calls with our top 10 suppliers. 10 minutes each, strict agenda. One thing you need from us. One thing we need from you. One risk on the horizon. We moved one critical component from a West Coast vendor to a Midwestern one based on lead time variance analysis, not vibes. We visited Redline on a Thursday, took the night shift coffee, and left with a capacity memo that saved us a month of headaches. This feels like the old way, the plant manager said. That's a compliment. We're not going back, I told him. We're going forward with our eyes open. On a rain-bright Friday, Mark from Sentinel showed up at Novatech's front desk without an appointment like a man with news. We're pulling all business from Titan Forge, he said over pastrami sandwiches at a deli where the owner still writes totals in pencil. I can't risk my project on a company whose president thinks lead time is a mindset. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Clara's decisions hurt good people who hadn't made them. I'm not here for sympathy, he said. I'm here with a proposition. We need those sub-assemblies. If Novatech can produce them, we'll sign a 3-year contract with volume guarantees. It'll justify a new line. Hypothetically, I said, because lawyers exist for a reason. That makes an acquisition more valuable, not less. Hypothetically, he agreed. We sign when you can deliver. I brought the proposal to Julia with a summary of Titan Forge's accelerating collapse and an outline of why buying assets now would save us 12 months of greenfield pain. Make a move, she said, but do it through Arthur. Keep our name off it until we see the whites of their eyes. Arthur called their lead investor pretending to be a retired man with time on his hands and a friend with a checkbook. They bit so fast he almost asked if they'd like fries with the order. They barely negotiated, he told me. They just want out before next quarter. Smells like fear. We moved. Lawyers drafted. Accountants counted. I walked our due diligence team through a plant I knew better than my own kitchen, pointing out the machines worth saving and the ones that had been a mistake on day one. We structured the deal to keep as many people as we could, to keep St. Paul open, to make vendor debts whole where it mattered because you don't build a future stiffing yesterday. And then it was Monday again, 3 months to the day since the day Clara tried to make a lesson out of me. I wore a navy suit because gray felt like a funeral and black like a joke. We walked into Titan Ford's glass conference room at 9 on the dot. Julia in a dark blazer that meant business, our counsel with the thick folder, Arthur with a face like a man who's seen storms and knows where the high ground is. The investors were already seated. Clara paced at the window like a cat kept indoors too long. When she turned and saw me, the color left her face in clean lines. What is this? She demanded. Why is he here? Arthur sat, folded his hands. Mr. Cross is here representing the acquiring party. We're not selling to him, she snapped, looking to her investors for spine. They looked at their papers like numbers might shield them. The preliminary agreement has been signed, said the lead investor, a thin man with a thinner patience. We're proceeding. Clara's composure cracked. He sabotaged us, she said, pointing at me as if I were a button you could press to fix things. He poisoned vendor relationships, I haven't contacted a single one of your suppliers since I left, I said, keeping my voice in the register you use with a skittish horse. I'll swear to it. Your problem isn't me. Your problem is that you treated people like parts. Parts resent that. Julia slid the term sheet across the table. Novatech Instruments will acquire Titan Forge's assets and assume certain obligations as outlined here, she said. We intend to retain a majority of the workforce, continue operations in St. Paul, and restore the reliability this brand used to stand for. What about me? Clara asked, and this time her voice had a quiver like a wire pulled too tight. Your services won't be required, Julia said, not unkindly. She didn't dress it up. Mercy is sometimes a clean line. Clara gathered her papers with hands that betrayed the calm her face tried to wear. You planned this, she said to me. From the beginning. No, I said. I planned to do my job. You planned to make an example. Both plans worked. She left. No slam, no speech. Just the soft sound of a door closing that meant one thing ending and another beginning. The investors signed like men taking a plea deal. When the last signature dried, Arthur stood, stretched his back, and looked at me with something like pride hiding behind his practical eyes. Let's go save the thing we built, he said. The first month after the acquisition was triage and rebuilding at the same time. We met with vendors in person, Prairie, Redline, Lakefront, Midwest Precision, sat at their tables, drank their factory coffee, and told the truth. We're paying past due invoices that should never have been past due. We're putting humans back on the phone. We're not playing chicken with your cash flow. In exchange, we need delivery schedules we can trust and quality that makes our inspectors bored. Men and women who had grown used to portals that auto-replied with, "Your message has been received," washed our mouths when we spoke, and then our hands when we wrote checks that cleared in 2 days. Trust doesn't require speeches. It requires doing what you said at a cost you can live with. We brought Brian over as production manager because he has the gene where chaos makes you calmer. We rehired 2 shop leads Clara had let go in a realignment, and their crews moved like they'd been allowed to exhale. We stabilized St. Paul by shifting 2 low-mix, high-volume lines out of the main plant to free up space for the custom assemblies that could actually pay for the lights. We integrated Novatech's quality management system, not to drown people in paperwork, but to stop arguing about what good looks like. We offered retention bonuses to the operators whose hands knew what the machines wanted. When you treat expertise like a cost, it leaves. When you treat it like equity, it stays. 2 months in, I stood with Julia on a mezzanine that looked down on a floor that sounded like back to normal. Parts bins clinking, torque wrenches clicking, forklifts humming instead of screeching. "We're going to beat the combined forecast," she said, tapping a tablet. "That contract from Sentinel sealed it." "That contract is a promise," I said. "We keep it, we're in the black. We break it, we're back where we started." "We'll keep it," she said. Juliet doesn't do bravado. She does math and people. On a Tuesday, Lila walked in with a box and a half-smile. "You said you'd build it clean," she told me. "I'm here to help you count." We made her CFO of the merged operation. She rebalanced payment terms to what they should have been and killed a plan someone had floated to improve cash by delaying wages on overtime. "We don't fix the books by breaking trust," she said, and I wrote it where I could see it. There were pains. Our first week, a valve on the old anodizing line failed and shut down a third of the plant. The new vendor portal, because yes, we kept parts of it, software isn't the devil, misrouted an urgent request and almost cost us 2 days. Apart from a new secondary supplier showed up out of spec and almost made it into a shipment before a woman named Tasha caught it with a finger feel I'd trust over a caliper in a pinch. We documented, corrected, and moved forward. The goal wasn't perfection. The goal was reliability you could explain. One late afternoon, Arthur paused in my doorway on his way to a fishing weekend that would and wouldn't happen because men like Arthur don't know how to retire from caring. "You proved your point," he said, leaning on the jam like it held up the conversation. "Built it back better." "It wasn't about proving a point," I said, which was mostly true. "Sure," he said, smiling. "Whatever helps you sleep." If revenge was in this story, it wasn't the cinematic kind. I didn't leak emails. I didn't call vendors and whisper poison. I didn't key anyone's car. I built something that made the thing that hurt me small. I stood on a mezzanine and watched operators who thought they'd be laid off in June earn paychecks in October. I sat across from a supplier who thought he'd be stiffed and wrote him a check backed by a bank that trusts us because we don't ask for favors we haven't earned. I watched Brian run a production meeting where nobody yelled because nobody had to prove they were the smartest by being the loudest. That's a kind of revenge, the kind that looks like decency. 6 months after we signed the papers, we hosted a barbecue in the loading bay at St. Paul. Fold-out tables with red checkered cloths, a grill someone hauled in on a trailer, kids running between pallets like they were ancient stones in a ruin. Julia gave a speech that was short enough to be remembered. "We said we'd keep this place open," she told the crowd. "We did. We said we'd earn your trust. You tell us if we are." People clapped, some because you clap at barbecues, some because they meant it. Mark from Sentinel raised a plastic cup at me. "Never doubted you," he said. "You totally doubted me," I said. "Fair," he laughed. "But you did what you said. That's rare." One evening on my way out, I passed the river. I pulled over without planning to and stood at the railing while the air went blue. The barges pushed upstream, slow, stubborn, inevitable. A text buzzed, a photo from Brian of a whiteboard in the production office with a scribbled note, "OTIF 99, 1%, and a smiley face drawn by someone who didn't know I hate smiley faces on whiteboards and for once didn't mind. Another buzz. A number from Chicago I recognized from a rumor. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curiosity won. "MS. Vance is consulting with us on portfolio operations," a polished voice said. We're evaluating mid-market manufacturing assets. We'd love to get your perspective on integration best practices. I deleted the message. I don't need to win twice. A week later, I took my daughter to lunch at a place that used to be a bank and now sells tacos. She asked if I was angry. Sometimes, I said, for 10 minutes at a time. Then I do something useful and it goes away. Are you proud? She asked. Sometimes, I said, for 5 minutes at a time. Then I find a mistake we can fix and it goes away. She rolled her eyes like children roll their eyes at parents who turn everything into philosophy. You built it back, she said. That counts. On a Thursday, I visited Prairie Steelworks. The foreman's mother still brought cinnamon rolls on Thursdays. We sat at a folding table that had heard more truth than any conference table I've ever known. That first month after they let you go, the foreman said, we were worried. Thought maybe the industry changed and we didn't get the memo. The memo was wrong, I said. Figured, he said. Want a cinnamon roll? Always, I said, and took one even though I shouldn't, because some rituals are how you say yes to the life you've got. After we ate, we walked the floor and talked about a new alloy they were testing. He pointed at a stack of billets and said, we can guarantee this capacity for you if we know your forecast is honest. I told him our forecast would be as honest as we could make it, and that when it wasn't, he'd hear it from me first. We shook hands. Those hands have saved me more than software ever will. Back at Novatech Titan, a stack of resumes waited on my desk. People wanted in. Word gets around when a place is sane. I flipped through them and thought about culture decks and value statements. We had a one-sentence culture. Do what you said you'd do. Everything else hangs from that nail. The next quarter, we closed with revenue north of $22 million on the combined books and a margin profile that let us sleep. Sentinel's line launched on time. A small medtech customer we'd almost lost came back after our quality team ran a joint root cause analysis that admitted our fault where it existed and didn't pretend when it didn't. Lila's dashboards looked boring, which is the highest compliment finance can pay to operations. Our top 3 vendors sent Christmas cards that weren't printed by a marketing team. One afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single typed sentence. They told me numbers aren't everything. Turns out numbers tell the truth if you know how to read them. No signature. I didn't need one. On a quiet night, months after the dust settled, I ran into Clara in an airport. We were 2 gates apart, separated by that peculiar loneliness you feel under fluorescent lights with a boarding pass in your hand. She saw me, hesitated, and walked over with a careful smile. Daniel, she said, congratulations. Looks like you landed well. We're doing good work, I said. She looked past me, at nothing in particular. I learned some things, she said, and I believed she thought she had. It's a different world. I underestimated some variables. People aren't variables, I said before I could help myself. She nodded like she wanted to argue and didn't. Take care, she said. You too, I said, and meant it. Rage is exhausting. Mercy isn't approval. It's a decision not to carry a weight that isn't yours. My flight boarded. I sat by the window, watched the ground crew marshal us into position with lighted wands like modern priests, and thought about the first sentence of this story. They tried to erase me with a sentence. The part that matters isn't what they tried. It's what I did after. I didn't scream. I didn't leak. I didn't scheme. I built. I built a system stronger than the one they broke. I built jobs into checks into dinners onto tables. I built a promise back into a handshake. That's the kind of revenge I can live with. Not getting even, getting it right. So if you ask me what happened to Titan Forge, I'll tell you the truth. It grew up, shed its old name, and learned the difference between a portal and a person. If you ask me what happened to me, I'll say I learned something too. Sometimes the most powerful sentence isn't the one they use to push you out. It's the one you say to yourself when the door closes and the noise dies. Understood. Then you go find the next door and build it better.